Aloha guys, Dr. Thomas coming back at you. Today we're going to study something difficult. Okay, we mentioned before that there are two parts to the nervous system, right? But I lied to you. There's more than that. There's the central nervous system, there's the peripheral nervous system, and there's the autonomic nervous system. Autonomic. Now, before we go any further, this is the way I always teach us. I want you to repeat after me. Autonomic means automatic. Autonomic means automatic. Autonomic means automatic. Now, what does that mean? The autonomic nervous system controls all the stuff that we don't have to think about. All the automatic things that takes place in our body. Allows the organs to respond to changing body needs. Carries out automatic, there it is, and unconscious visceral responses. Regulates organ function. Visceral reflex. For example, pupillary response and blood pressure reflex. So yes, there's the autonomic nervous system. Visceral reflex pathway, let's see. Now, I wish they wouldn't get into this right now. Pupillary response, if you shine a bright light in the pupil, both pupils should, even if it's only in one, should constrict. And also blood pressure reflex. You can lower the blood pressure by compressing on the nerve, or the carotid arteries. The autonomic deals with that too, but I wish they wouldn't get into it right now. Let's see. Activation of receptor, transmission of sensory information to the CNS, processing of sensory information by the CNS, transmission of motor response to the effector organs, like the pupils, visceral response. Okay, well, yeah, great. This is an important function, but it's not the one best associated with the autonomic nervous system. Now, autonomic means automatic. Autonomic means automatic. There are two parts to it. There's the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic. The sympathetic wires you up. The parasympathetic brings you back down. The sympathetic wires you up. The parasympathetic brings you back down. You might have heard of the fight or flight response, the great Hans Selye, who studied stress. The sympathetic is involved in that. What it does, it cranks up the heart rate, the blood pressure, releases sugar into the bloodstream, all that stuff to get you wired up where you can either fight or haul butt and run. The parasympathetic brings you back down. They call it the feed or breed. I kind of like that. So you're interested in eating and reproductive behavior. Notice the parasympathetic in green comes out of the brainstem and down the sacral area. All the sympathetic portions of the ANS, autonomic, are in the thoracics and lumbar area. Or maybe just thoracics, I think. Okay. Two divisions, sympathetic and parasympathetic. Sympathetic, fight or flight. Heart rate, contractile strength increase, blood vessels constrict to raise the pressure up. Blood pressure increases, bronchial tubes dilate so you can suck more oxygen in. Pupils dilate so you can see what's going on. The adrenal medulla secretes we don't know what that is, but the adrenal glands secrete epinephrine and norepinephrine. You know this better as adrenaline, it's the same thing, and noradrenaline. Excess sweating, diaphoresis, why you're all cranked up and wired. To able to defend yourself or to haul butt and run. Okay, now the parasympathetic. Feed and breed response, heart rate decreases, blood pressure decreases, digestive tract stimulates motility and secretion. Pretty much the opposite of everything the sympathetic does. One of the problems, guys, with being stressed out all the time is it kicks in the sympathetic nervous reflex, or response is the better word. And so it raises your blood pressure, it increases your blood sugar, and all kinds of things. So it can cause real problems. And if you know, and what am I trying to say? What I'm trying to say is, what one person finds stressful and another one finds stressful might be quite different. And a lot of people, I think, work at jobs that they may not be happy with, for example. And they have a boss they don't like, and they stress, and so they're stressed throughout their day. For another person doing the very same thing may not faze them in the least, you know. Of course, I'm from the old school, so I will say that a lot of you got to be tough, guys, in this world. You got to be tough. We got a lot of wimps out there. And I'm joking, but I'm really not joking. I don't know what to say. Autonomic terminology and pharmacology. Okay, this is the part I dreaded. Sympathico-mimetic. Sympathomimetic. In other words, it mimics the sympathetic. Think of it like that. Which actually is what it means. It's drugs that increase the sympathetic response. And see what they do naturally. They increase heart rate, force of cardiac contraction, how much pressure the heart contracts with, blood pressure. Parasympathomimetic imitates or causes parasympathetic responses, like decreased heart rate, increased digestive. Vasomimetic, vaso means having to do with blood vessels. Vagolytic has to do with the vagus nerve, cranial nerve number 12 we just talked about. I know it's tough, guys, when these terms like this are just tossed out there. I don't like doing it that way. Of course, I didn't design these PowerPoints, or I wouldn't have done it that way. I would have explained some of this first instead of just throwing it out there with a shovel. But what this is pharmacology is various prescription drugs that have this effect for different reasons. Autonomic tone and vasomotor tone. Sympathetics and parasympathetics continually fire all the time at a low level. Each system dominates in a specific situation. Resting heart rate is controlled by the parasympathetics. Vasomotor blood vessel tone by the sympathetics. Guys, the major blood vessels in the body have a layer of smooth muscle, and they can dilate and constrict on command. Like everything in biological systems that I have great respect for, it's much more complicated than it may look. It's not just a bunch of tubes like plumbing. It's moving, adapting, living. I'm talking about the blood vessels now. Devices that can change their permeability and their diameter and stuff. These control all that. Why? Because we have to have the blood pressure at a certain rate, guys. Okay, remember, ganglia are cell bodies of nerve cells outside of the CNS. That's how they're defined. Numbers, ganglia. Ganglia are the cell bodies of nerves that are positioned outside of the central nervous system. Arrangement of both sympathetic and parasympathetic fibers, preganglionic fiber, ganglion, postganglionic fiber. Okay, here's the CNS, here's the spinal cord. This is the heart. Here is the preganglionic, means before you get to the ganglion. This is one neuron. And it has a synapse here in the cell body, and has the neuron number 2, which is called the postganglionic fiber. Why? Here's the ganglion. Here's the one before it, pre. Here's the one after it, post. So the signal from the central nervous system goes through into the ganglion. It's modified in some manner before it goes to the heart. In this case, it can also go to other organs too. Neurons of the sympathetic nervous system. Location of ganglia, close to and parallel to the spinal cord. Okay. Now again, this is the sympathetic. Naming of fibers. There's preganglionic, cholinergic, and postganglionic, which are adrenergic. I know what you're thinking. Yeah, I'm thinking the same thing, believe me. I don't like to go over this material because it's really hard, and you can't explain this easily. Okay. Cholinergic means that the neurotransmitter being used is our old friend acetylcholine. Remember that from muscles? Cholinergic fibers use acetylcholine as their neurotransmitter. Adrenergic fibers use norepinephrine. Now, there's adrenaline and noradrenaline, but in science and medicine it's more frequently called epinephrine and norepinephrine. So adrenergic fibers, the neurotransmitter is norepinephrine. You just have to memorize this, guys. And then cholinergic fibers, but see, acetylcholine, it kind of sounds like it. Adra kind of sounds like adrenaline, but they're using the opposite. You just have to memorize it. So at the synapses here, is acetylcholine's working. At the ones here, norepinephrine is working. CNS is characterized by the nerve fibers coming out of the thoracic spine area. Airplanes going over. And also, the cell bodies, the ganglia, are unclose to it. Okay. Parasympathetic comes out of the brainstem and the sacral area, and their ganglia are way out here close to the organs that they're innervating. Sympathetic is in close to the spine. Parasympathetic is out by the organs, the cell bodies, the ganglia. Location of ganglia near or in effector organs, the organs that are being affected. Preganglionic or cholinergic, and postganglionic or cholinergic. All right, that's great. So in parasympathetic, they're all cholinergic, means acetylcholine. Okay, so here's the cholinergic fibers, the preganglionic. They use acetylcholine. Here, and here are the ganglia, and here are the postganglionic fibers, which are also cholinergic. Okay, that's good. That'll make it easier to memorize. You're going to have to go back over this unless you are blessed with a photographic memory. Running with cranial nerves. Okay, some cranial nerves have autonomic fibers and some don't. The oculomotor cranial 3 has autonomic nerve fibers. The facial nerve, cranial nerve 7 does. Glossopharyngeal, cranial nerve 9. And the vagus nerve, cranial nerve 10. Now this, I don't know that it is, but this could be a good test question. Which of the following cranial nerves do not contain or do contain autonomic nerve fibers? See what I'm thinking, guys? Okay, so there are two neurotransmitters active in the autonomic nervous system. There's acetylcholine and norepinephrine. There's two types of fibers: cholinergic, which use acetylcholine, adrenergic, which are involved with norepinephrine or noradrenaline. See? Neurotransmitters. Of course, we know what they are. They're active in the synapse. These are the two we're talking about. Acetylcholine is secreted by cholinergic fibers and diffuses to the receptor sites on the opposite end of across the synaptic cleft. Afterwards, it's degraded by acetylcholinesterase, the enzyme that breaks it down. If it doesn't, guys, it causes a sustained contraction. I mentioned before that a lot of military nerve gases work that way. They make every nerve muscle in your body go into a cramp. It's a horrible death. Norepinephrine is secreted by adrenergic fibers. Okay, we can live with that. Okay, I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to try to explain it. Two types of autonomic nervous system receptors. Cholinergic are muscarinic and nicotinic. Adrenergic are alpha, beta 1, and beta 2. How are you going to get by this? Just memorize it, guys. Just memorize it. That's all you can do. Write it on a sheet of paper and keep going over it till it's in the brain, long enough to take the test. Cholinergic receptors, muscarinic, located on the effector organ of parasympathetics. Nicotinic, ganglia, not autonomic. Here's the preganglionic, here's the postganglionic, here's acetylcholine. Muscarinic receptors, alpha and beta nicotinic receptors, skeletal muscle. Okay, you're going to have to go back over that one on your own some. Adrenergic receptors are alpha 1 and 2, beta 1 and 2. All adrenergic receptors located on the effector organ of sympathetic nervous system. Autonomic pharmacology. In other words, guys, there's different reasons. Let's say, for example, a person was having trouble with their pulse rate wasn't high enough for different reasons, or their blood pressure was too low, or both. The physician would give them drugs that will stimulate this autonomic system and crank that stuff up a little more. You have to have blood pressure, at a certain. I know we have more problems with high blood pressure, but we have problems with low blood pressure too. And you have to have a certain amount. It has to, for example, to keep the kidneys working. Okay, we're running out of time. I knew I couldn't get this one done. We'll pick up here when we come back. Dr. Tom signing off. Hallelujah.